All right, the 49ers wrap up their joint practice against the Raiders on Thursday, and it certainly sounds like Kyle Shanahan is planning for more of the regulars, more of the starters to play or at least see some action Saturday night or Saturday. It's a 1 p.m. game when the 49ers play the Raiders. In fact, what he said after practice was over on Thursday was that he would like for Brock Purdy to play. He says, we haven't decided anything for sure yet. They'll watch the film from the practice that took place here on Thursday in Vegas. And by the way, I'm in one of the Raiders staff members' office here. So that's why you see the Raiders paraphernalia and memorabilia and stuff behind me. But what Shanahan said was that he is planning on getting some of the starters going. He said there might be a couple of guys he rests, but they'll figure it out in the next 24 hours. But I certainly didn't get that vibe after the Broncos practice where it just seemed like they were going to rest all the guys. And maybe that had something to do with it being the first preseason game and not the second preseason game. So 49ers and the Raiders were out there. A couple of things that just to start off with, Nick Bosa did not practice. He's experiencing soreness in his neck. Shanahan said he hopes to have him back next week. Jason Pinnock and Trey Brown, two of the 49ers free agent pickups. They both have situations going on with their heels. They said both of them almost practiced on Thursday, and then they'll see if they can actually play on Saturday. Ben Barch, the offensive guard for the 49ers, the guy who's the presumptive starter at left guard, he didn't practice with an elbow injury. That occurred on Tuesday. He left the field under his own power, but he's going to be out this week. And so the Pinnock injury and the Barch injury kind of opens the door for a couple of guys I'll talk about a little bit later. But just to finish this off, Upton Stout with the calf, he remains out. Jordan Watkins with the high ankle sprain, that's a little bit more long-term, looking at somewhere around a month. And then Robert Beal, the edge rusher, has an adductor issue. Very scary moment for the 49ers on the practice field during one-on-one drills, and sounded like it was very similar to what happened with Mykel Williams, the first-round draft pick last Thursday against the Broncos. In this situation, I was watching it. CJ West was doing a one-on-one pass rush drill. He was engaged with a Raiders offensive lineman, and his left knee just buckled. And frankly, it did not look good at all. But after he was on the ground for a little bit of time, 49ers medical staff was over there, the training staff, and he got to his feet and he was able to walk off. He did not practice for the rest of the day. And the word is that the stability test that they gave him checked out okay. So that means no ACL tear. Huge news, great news for the 49ers. But they think it's a hyperextension of the leg, of the knee, something very similar to what Mykel Williams had last week. So probably, I mean, I'm not a doctor. I only play one here on my YouTube channel, but it sounds like probably a week or two, probably 2 weeks. So that's huge when you consider that, how bad it could have looked. 49ers have had all these issues with their defensive line, the depth there, and that's another blow. So a guy that will probably be out of action for a little bit. 49ers, before they left for Vegas, they did bring in two defensive linemen that they ended up signing, William Bradley King and also Damone Harris. Now, the corresponding moves was that they waived Michael Dwumfor, and here's kind of a big one. The 49ers put on injured reserve Andre Dillard, the former first-round pick of the Eagles. He was they're thinking about him being, a swing backup tackle for this team, but did not participate in the offseason program due to an ankle injury that he had some procedure done in the offseason, and now he's injured. He's opened camp on PUP. Now he's out, and so as Kyle Shanahan said, would have been nice to have him. Do the 49ers look for an offensive lineman outside the building that can come in and make the team and be a primary backup? The answer to that is probably no. Because as Shanahan pointed out, if they're on the outside now, they're on the outside for a reason. So Is it possible that after the cuts to 53 that the 49ers could find an offensive lineman that shakes free potentially? But, I'd say right now, when you look at their roster, I would think, well, put it this way. When I did my 53 man, I said, I thought that maybe the top 8 guys were kind of clear cut, with Burford being a backup left tackle coming off a rough game, of course, against the Broncos, but maybe not as quite as bad as it looked because there were some mental errors from some of the other offensive players that could have taken some heat off him. Austin Pleasance looks like, he's the front runner at right tackle, with Burford being a left tackle. And then, Nick Zakel has been somebody who's been working at guard and center, and he appeared to be kind of in the mix for starting left guard spot, but Ben Bartch seems to be the favorite there. However, the 2 rookies that I was talking about, where the door has been open with the Bartch injury, perhaps, and the Jason Pinnock situation where he's out for a few days anyway, a couple days, it has really opened the door for Marquis Siegel. Marquis Siegel ran with the ones on Thursday at practice. He continues to impress. He's one of those guys that once the pads went on, he's gotten better. But the guy, so we've talked about Marquis Siegel. We really haven't talked too much about Connor Colby. And he's a guy that when Bartch went down, it was Colby who stepped in at that left guard position. And then he did split time in practice on Thursday with Nick Zakel. And what Shanahan said about Connor Colby, 7th round pick from Iowa, comes from a pro style offense where the offensive linemen are doing a lot of things that they do in the NFL. However, as Shanahan said, nobody in college, there's basically no college offense that requires the amount of running that the 49ers require from their offensive linemen. So he said the thing they look for with offensive linemen that come to the team is just, are they getting better every week? Are they showing improvement? And with the case of Connor Colby, that has very much been the situation where he has gotten a lot better the last couple of weeks. And dare I say, could be putting himself in that conversation for a starting job, or at least a primary backup position. And another guy that Shanahan singled out was Drew Moss, undrafted rookie from Colorado State, who's kind of caught on a little bit as well. So on this particular day of practice, watching the defense like I did, my colleague Jennifer Lee Chan was over on the offensive side. So check out our podcast, 49ers Talk. Should be dropping a little bit later in the day. But D. Winters was very physical, knocked Ashton Genty to the turf once. He's just been very, very active, and boy, he's made very much a lot of headway toward winning that starting job. Nick Martin, I think, had a better day. Fred Warner kind of peeled back the curtain a little bit in talking to Nick Martin after that rough game against the Broncos. And the thing he talked about with Nick was just focus on getting better at one thing every day. And for Martin, I think there's a lot of stuff that he can work off of to try to get better off that game against the Broncos. It's the tackling angles, tracking the ball. It's also just where his eyes are, pass coverage. So Nick Martin's a guy that certainly has a lot of potential, but D. Winters seems to be putting it all together and is definitely the front runner for the 49ers starting job at the will linebacker position. As far as the practice goes on Thursday, 49ers using a lot of different guys on defense. Alfred Collins, I thought, looked good after CJ West went down with the injury. By the way, it was CJ West and Clea Davis running with the ones at defensive tackle. Alfred Collins started seeing more playing time with the ones after that. And I thought he looked okay. There was a point where got kind of a second reaction sack. It wasn't like he didn't beat the guy cleanly off the line of scrimmage, but ended up getting in there. Dallas Flowers keep an eye on number 35, cornerback for the 49ers. Looks like he's really making strides and making his case to be the 49ers' third cornerback. Renardo Green remains out of action with the hamstring injury. So Dallas Flowers, D. Winters, those are two of the guys that really showed up on the practice field on the offensive side, or I'm sorry, on the defensive side for the 49ers. Jake Moody had 2 field goal attempts of more than 50 yards. He made one, missed the other one, wide right. Chase Lucas, nickelback, by the way, Upton Stout did not practice. Chase Lucas had an interception on a tipped pass, so he continues to show good things and kind of open eyes and making his case for a roster spot and maybe a role in this 49ers team. Over on the offensive side, I looked over there and saw George Kittle making some plays, Ricky Pearsall making some plays, Kyle Juszczyk caught a deep pass. And the one thing that Brock Purdy said was he felt better about the offense just from beginning to end, whereas last week they kind of got their butts kicked early by the Broncos, but turned it on late. This was more of a consistent performance all the way through. Talked to Colton McKivitz after practice. He was going up against a lot of Max Crosby, and McKivitz was really happy, I think, with how he performed after getting his butt kicked by Max Crosby a couple of years ago. In fact, he said, even after the practice was over, he said to Max Crosby, a little bit different than 2 years ago, right? Well, that said, Crosby had a good day, but just the one-on-one matchups where they're not game planning or doing anything like that left Colton McKivitz very, I think, encouraged with where his progress is right now. And finally, one other note. Juwan Jennings, according to the social media, in Las Vegas, getting treatment on his leg with the calf injury that's kept him out. You know, how the contract plays into that, you know, I don't know, but it does appear that, you know, there's an issue there with Juwan Jennings' calf. One of the things that Brock Purdy said was that he is still able to engage both Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk, and just, you know, talking through the offense after a practice is over. He said he'll go up to those guys, or he'll be with them, and he'll say, "Hey, what'd you see on this route?" Meaning, on a particular play in practice, another player in that position, what did he see from what that player did? How would he have run the route differently? What would he want from Brock in that situation? So they're not getting the on-field reps with, you know, Brock Purdy and Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk, but, you know, it sounds like there's still that conversation. And so, you know, there will be an adjustment period. You know, they maybe not hit the ground running like regular season, middle of the season when those guys come back. But the idea is, you know, to keep them engaged and to be on the same page from that standpoint, so that maybe that learning curve is shortened once those guys get back. And it does sound like, you know, Friars expect Juwan Jennings to be ready for the regular season. How the contract situation plays in all of that, who knows? But that's kind of the story from here. And speaking of wide receivers, Malik Turner is a player the 49ers signed at the wide receiver position as they're running low on those numbers. And he was back. I noticed him back fielding punts. So Malik Turner coming off a good season with the Michigan Panthers of the United Football League. One of many new faces for the 49ers here in training camp. A lot on the defensive line. They're thin in the defensive backfield, and they're thin at wide receiver. And Shanahan said they were really challenged those guys to step up and practice well, and they got through it. Good work, 49ers and the Raiders. And like I said, day off, or they won't practice on Friday, but they'll be out there playing preseason game number 2 on Saturday. So thanks for tuning in to this video, and that is it for now.